If you have watched the first two videos in this series, you have the concept and the math. You know why soft retirement makes financial sense. You have run your gap, bridge, and runway numbers. Now comes a stat most professionals never actually take. Hi, I'm Kurt Rose, CPA, former CFO. I spent 40 years on the employer side of the table. I know how these conversations land, what makes a proposal easy to approve, and what kills a good idea before it gets traction. This video gives you the framework, not the theory, the actual structure, how to prepare, how to frame it, what to put in writing, and what to do if the answer is no. I call this the employer transition framework. Let's get into it. Here is the reality most professionals never consider. Phased retirement is one of the most underutilized tools in workforce transitions, not because employers refuse it, because most professionals never bring it up. Employers almost never volunteer the option. The conversation has to come from you. And most people assume the answer is no before they ever ask the question. Defaulting to silence is a decision, and it costs professionals years of flexibility and income they did not have to give up. Why does no one ask? Well, because the conversation feels risky. There is no established script for asking to work less while staying employed. The request sits at the intersection of career identity, financial planning, and personal vulnerability, all at once. Without a roadmap, most people wait until they are ready to walk out entirely. By then, the negotiating position is gone. This presentation is that roadmap. Before you walk into that room, one mental shift matters more than anything else. You are not asking for a favor. This is not a personal request. It is a business solution to a costly employer problem. The old frame, I want to work less and slow down before I retire. Well, that centers your preference and signals disengagement. The new frame, I want to structure a transition that protects the work we have built together. That positions you as someone solving a problem. Understanding their problem changes everything about how you show up. Here is what the numbers actually say. Replacing a senior professional costs between 50 and 200% of annual salary. That is the Gallup and Society of Human Resource Management figures. For executive and senior leaders, that number can reach 250%. Search fees, onboarding time, the productivity gap while the replacement ramps up. Those costs add up fast. When you propose a structured transition, you are offering a solution to a problem that costs your employer real money. That is your starting position. The financial cost is only part of the picture. Institutional knowledge does not transfer through an offboarding checklist. What you carry is deeper than any document. Client relationships built over years, internal systems and unwritten processes, team dynamics and organizational trust. A structured phase transition is the only way to protect what took years to build. That protection is the value you are offering. Keep that framing front and center when you walk into that room. There are three structures employers actually approve. Know which one fits your situation before the conversation starts. Reduced hours, same role, fewer days per week is the most common starting point. Project-based, you define the scope with a clear endpoint. Works well for knowledge transfer. Consulting conversion from a W-2 to a 1099. Same company, some employers actually prefer this. Each carries different tax, benefits, and Social Security implications. So know yours before you sit down. The first structure, reduced hours. This is the most common starting point and the easiest proposal for an employer to say yes to. Same role, 3 or 4 days per week, proportional salary adjustment, no new contract type, no new HR framework. It is familiar, it is low risk, and it requires the least structural change on their side. If you are not sure where to start, this is your opening position. The second structure, project-based engagement. Define a specific deliverable with a clear start and end date. This works especially well for knowledge transfer, client transitions, or a defined initiative with a natural conclusion. The employer gets a built-in endpoint they can plan around. Both sides know exactly when and how it concludes. For employers who are nervous about open-ended arrangements, this is often the cleanest structure to approve. The third structure, consulting conversion from W-2 to 1099 with the same company. Some employers actually prefer this because it gives them headcount and budget flexibility. That can make their approval easier, not harder. But before you agree, understand what this path costs you. Loss of employer-sponsored benefits is immediate. Self-employment tax adds another, at a minimum, 7.65% to your cost structure. You now pay both the employee and employer sides of payroll taxes. Build every one of these costs into your rate before you commit to any number. This is a step most professionals skip. Know your numbers before the conversation. 3 specific answers you need before you walk in. First, your minimum bridge income. What is the least you need from this employer to make the arrangement work financially? If you ran the gap, bridge, runway framework from video 2, you already have this number. Second, your non-negotiable benefits. Which benefits must stay in place and for how long? Healthcare is almost always the critical one. Third, your walkaway date. Know the date you are prepared to leave regardless of outcome. That date anchors the entire conversation and protects you from indefinite delay. You negotiate from strength when the numbers are already decided. Healthcare is the variable most professionals underestimate. In 2026, the numbers are material. Enhanced ACA subsidies expire at the end of 2025. Unsubsidized marketplace premiums for a 60-year-old now run up to $1,800 per month. For a couple, the upper range hits $21,600 per year. This is not a hypothetical. It is a hard dollar figure you must model before you sit down. If you do not know this number before the conversation, you do not know your floor. Here is the implication most people miss. Benefits continuation may be worth more than the salary itself. Before you walk into any negotiation, convert your healthcare cost into a precise annual dollar figure. That number becomes your non-negotiable anchor. Knowing it is not a scare tactic. It is a planning input. It defines your true minimum negotiating floor. In some cases, accepting a lower cash salary in exchange for full benefits continuation is the better financial outcome. You cannot make that calculation without the number. Timing is not a minor detail. The same proposal lands completely differently depending on when you bring it. Best timing, after a visible win, strong review, or project completion. 12 to 18 months before your target start date, when the business is stable and leadership is settled. Worst timing, during budget cuts, restructuring, or leadership transitions, after you have already visibly disengaged. Too close to your actual exit with no runway to negotiate. Timing is a strategic decision, make it deliberately. How you open the conversation determines how it ends. The wrong framing, hey, I want to slow down and work less before I retire. That sentence centers your preference, signals disengagement, and puts the employer in a defensive position. The right framing is, I want to structure a transition that protects the work we have built and sets up the team for continuity. That positions you as a steward of the business, not someone winding down. Anchor on knowledge transfer, client continuity, and team stability. Your reduced hours are a byproduct of their problem being solved. That is not the point of the conversation, and it should not sound like it is. Verbal agreements fade, especially after leadership changes. A verbal understanding that feels solid on Tuesday can be completely reinterpreted by the following month. Without documentation, you have no foundation to stand on. A written agreement signals professionalism and seriousness. It reduces misunderstanding and protects both sides. Every phrased management should be documented before it starts. A written agreement is not adversarial, it is professional. 4 elements every written agreement needs. 1, reduced schedule, specific days, hours per week, and availability expectations, written out precisely. 2, compensation, the salary reduction formula or project-based rate with payment timing clearly stated. 3, the benefits continuation, healthcare coverage, retirement contributions, vesting schedules, what stays and for how long. And 4, a defined endpoint, when the arrangement concludes and what happens next for both parties. That last element matters more than most people include. Give the employer a clear conclusion and you remove one of the most common reasons a good proposal stalls. If the consulting conversion path is on the table, here is what the numbers look like. Advisory and consulting roles for senior professionals typically run $1,500 to $2,500 per day. Interim leadership and crisis management roles run higher than that. But your gross rate must cover more than income, replacement cost of the lost employer benefits, self-employment tax, your own business expenses, gaps between engagements. Build all of it into your rate before the conversation, not during it. Let me be direct about what contractor status actually costs you the moment it starts. Employer-sponsored health, dental, vision, and retirement contributions end the day you convert. That is immediate, no transition period. Self-employment tax adds 7.65% to your cost structure on top of your regular income tax. You paid both the employer and the employee sides of payroll taxes. You need to factor every cost into your consulting rate before you agree to any number, not after, before. If your employer says no, that is one data point about one negotiation. It is not a verdict on soft retirement. A no tells you something useful about where flexibility exists in the organization. The strategy does not collapse. It just routes to a different path. The soft retirement plan works with or without your current employer's participation. And the most important move after a no is to start building your external pipeline immediately. Here's the thing about that external pipeline. You do not need to find new clients. You need to make a new offer to people who already know, trust, and respect you. Former colleagues, people who have worked alongside you and already know what you deliver. Past clients. The trust is already there. The engagement is what is new. Vendors and industry peers. Contacts who understand your expertise and may have immediate needs for it. Consulting pipelines typically take 3 to 6 months to activate. Plant those seeds before the employer conversation concludes, not after. Most phased retirement proposals that fail do so for the same predictable reasons. 4 mistakes that kill good proposals. First, no written proposal. Vague requests get vague answers and usually get deferred indefinitely. Second, using retirement language. Words like wind down or retire trigger human resource processes that work against you. Frame it as a restructuring or a transition. Third, no defined endpoint. Open-ended arrangements create ambiguity and liability. Employers want to know when and how this concludes. And 4, no successor identified. Without a handoff plan, the employer has no path forward. Identifying a successor removes the easiest reason to stall. 3 resources to act on before the conversation, not after. First, download the Soft Retirement Transition Checklist. That is the next video in the series, and the link is in the description. Second, model your healthcare and income scenarios in bolden before you sit down. Know your floor before you walk into that room. Link is also in the description. Third, free hub access at retirepreneur.link/hub. Frameworks, tools, and support built specifically for professionals navigating this transition. This video is part of a 4-part series. Each one builds directly on the last. The employer conversation is to set most professionals delay until the negotiating position is already gone. They wait until they are ready to walk out the door. By then, the leverage has shifted. The framework is straightforward. Know your numbers before you walk in. Frame the proposal around their problem, not your preference. Get everything in writing. Build your external pipeline in parallel regardless of how the conversation goes. Video 4 in this series covers the full 5-year execution plan. The best time to start this conversation was 6 months ago. The second best time is now. Keep building.